Joining us now is Kris Hall. He's the Vice President and a certified insurance counselor at the Kleinschmidt Agency, which is a division of the Meadowbrook Insurance Agency. Joining us on the Megacast as this week, January 31st through February 4th, is National Identity Theft Awareness Week. Learn more information at identitytheft.gov. Kris, thank you for being with us today.
You bet, Tyler. Good to be with you.
Good to be with you as well. So while we're on the topic of identity theft, with this being National Identity Theft Week, it comes in many different forms. So for those that may have heard the term but may not know the exact definition or the broad form of the definition of identity theft, what defines what identity theft is, and what are some of the different ways in which someone's identity may be stolen?
That is a great question. We kind of throw around the term identity theft as a broad brush type of term. That could be anything from having your credit card stolen and used without your knowledge, all the way to including having your social security number stolen and taxes filed on your behalf to steal your tax return. Really anything that surrounds your identity, financially, or even things like a breach on your computer where they hold your computer hostage until you pay them a certain amount of Bitcoin. I mean, there's all different forms of identity theft. And in this increasingly digital age that we're in with smart devices and how online everything is, it's more important than ever to kind of familiarize yourself with the different tactics that these hackers use, for lack of a better term, and also figure out how to mitigate your exposure to being a victim yourself.
And so it seemed that even years ago, and fairly recently, that even despite the advances in technology and the way that technology has become a greater factor in our daily life and in every area of our daily life in the past few years, that even just years ago, it was still kind of the common traits of, here's how you prevent identity theft. Don't tell anyone your social security number unless they absolutely need to have it, or you trust them with that information for a legitimate reason. Don't go giving out your credit card information either. Make sure that you know where all this personal information is being stored, and you're very careful with what documents maybe you leave out. Now it's a different story, and people need to be extra vigilant about all of their information, both in a hard copy form, but also in soft copy form on their devices and especially on the web. And do you think, despite all we know about technology today and all that we know about the security risks associated with the technology that we're using in our everyday life, on our smartphones, on our tablets, on our computers, and so on, that people are properly taking seriously the threat of identity theft?
Well, you're absolutely right. Back in the day, you had some good tips. We could largely control that ourselves by simply shredding documents that had account numbers and social security numbers on it, things like that. You could kind of contain it within your own house. Nowadays, we have provided so much information to a various amount of companies simply just through the course of doing business, that now there is an inherent exposure to those companies. And even if you're not a victim yourself being targeted personally, we've all seen the reports where massive companies will have these large data breaches, and data is out there at a mass level, and who knows if your information is on one of those spreadsheets that's been acquired by nefarious actors. So again, there's, even if you take kind of the right steps to mitigate it within your own household and you're doing all the right things, like on a soft copy, you really can't control what's going on out there on the World Wide Web. So, I have some tips here today that might be able to help you, even free tips that can help you reduce your exposure. And then if you want to get into it, if you do find yourself a victim of identity theft or fraud or cyber extortion attack, there's some solutions out there that are not necessarily free, but might provide you some remedy if you fall victim to it yourself. But the key here, if there's anything to learn, is preventing yourself from being a victim to begin with is far easier than trying to recover your good name after you're already a victim.
Yeah, much easier to take measures before identity theft becomes a problem than to deal with it when it is a problem. We're joined by Kris Hall, certified insurance counselor at the Kleinschmidt agency, which is a division of Meadowbrook Insurance Agency, joining us on the Megacast. Let's go over some of those tips, because we talked about some of the basic ones that have been commonplace in everyday life for a number of decades as the technological age that we're in now has developed, and as we continue through it. What are some other more modernized tips for preventing identity theft or taking swift action if you believe that your identity may have been breached before it's fully stolen or used for nefarious purposes?
Right. Well, we've all heard the basics, have good passwords, complex passwords, different passwords for each of your logins. Don't use the same password for everything. Have a good, strong Wi-Fi password, and also keep your software updated. The more smart devices you have, the more potential exposure. And if a hacker is able to identify an area where they can get into something very quickly, usually the developer can release a patch that will patch that up. But you got to keep your software updated to take advantage of that. So those are kind of the basic tips. Now, if you want to go a level beyond that, there's something out there called a credit freeze. Okay, so anytime you apply for credit, whether it's through a credit card company or a mortgage or an auto loan, they check your credit by reaching out to one of the three credit bureaus, TransUnion, Equifax, and Experian. So you can actually proactively contact them if you don't anticipate applying for any credit in the near future and freeze your credit. I've done it on all three of mine. It was free of charge. And then, anytime somebody tries to take out credit in your name, it will be immediately denied. That's probably the strongest free thing that you could do to mitigate becoming a victim of identity fraud yourself. Now, that's not going to affect you if, let's say, somebody wants to steal your tax return. So the best tip that you can have there, and that's actually on the rise. I was looking at the stats here, 3 million people had fraudulent tax returns filed in their name in 2019, the most recent stat. So it's on the rise. File your taxes early, as soon as you can, because it's basically the first one to get to it is the one that gets the refund. So if you wait until March, April to file your taxes, you're just giving that much more time for somebody who might potentially have your data to file ahead of you. So credit freeze and file your taxes early are maybe the two biggest tips that I can give you to proactively mitigate your risk.
We're joined by Kris Hall, the certified insurance counselor with the Kleinschmidt agency, which is a division of Meadowbrook Insurance Agency, joining us on the Megacast. All great tips to help you prevent identity theft as you're taking precautions to lock down your credit file, especially where you have more commonplace breaches of information, or where people are then executing on the information they may obtain. And oftentimes when they are able to execute on that information that they have stolen, and that they will apply for credit, or they'll apply for housing, they'll apply for even cell phone plans with your identity information. Oftentimes that can go unnoticed because people are either not regularly checking their credit report or not checking their once yearly free credit report from all three agencies to make sure that information is accurate and address it if it's not. Are there certain steps that people can also take to be alerted when there are those changes on their credit file more swiftly, so that if some action that is out of the ordinary or is definitely not something that is an act that they took, that they can get on top of that quickly and address those issues as soon as possible? Because as you said before, the longer that process goes through, the more damage that these identity thieves can take.
Well, that's right. And in addition, to the tips that you gave, there's several different reporting. You need checking your credit report annually, or staying on top of it just to see if there's open accounts that are appearing without your knowledge is crucial. So you got to make this as part of maybe your annual review as you start to review your finances. Tax season's a great time. The only official website is annualcreditreport.com. That's where you can get a free report. It's government sponsored. It's actually a law that they have to release it to you, and you can check your credit. So annualcreditreport.com. But as you indicated, there are some paid services. We don't typically endorse any of those in particular, but if you pay for a service, we've all heard the big names out there. They will kind of monitor your credit for you, and if they're basically checking your credit report periodically, and then if they notice any changes from the previous day, that's when they're bringing it to your attention. So those are what some of the paid services do. But in my experience, there's really not much that they can do that you can't do yourself if you take a proactive approach. And if you do fall victim to one of these attacks, there are some insurance solutions that you can now put on your homeowner's policy, or if you're renting, your renter's policy. Our industry has responded to the increased threat that we're seeing over the past couple of years, and there's really two endorsements that you might want to consider that are, again, inexpensive, $20-30 a year maybe. One in particular is called identity theft coverage. It seems pretty self-explanatory, but what it really is helping you restore your financial identity by reimbursing you for time spent taken off of work. If you have to file documents and things like that, it can reimburse you for those costs. It's a decent endorsement, and it's definitely worth considering, but there's a newer one that's a little more all-encompassing. It's called Home Cyber Protection. You might not have it available yet, but many companies that I work with do have it. It's going to cover what I just mentioned, and typically it's also going to cover things like cyber extortion. If, again, like I said earlier, if somebody freezes your computer, what do? Well, you can get consultation with an expert to help you negotiate with whoever has locked down your computer. And then if it turns out that you do suffer a loss, the insurance company, usually if you have this endorsement, is going to reimburse you for those costs that you have lost as part of that extortion attempt. So the home cybersecurity endorsement is actually a little more all-encompassing. Those two in particular, if you're looking for an insurance solution, check both of those out as well.
We're joined by Kris Hall, certified insurance counselor with the Kleinschmidt Agency, which is a division of Meadowbrook Insurance Agency, joining us on the Megacast. Of course, you mentioned those two provisions that you can put into either your homeowner's insurance or your renter's insurance to help protect you from identity theft, and some of the steps, of course, that you can also take to check your credit yourself or through some of those paid services. And also what's great as the technology has expanded and we're able to access more information online that we previously had to go into brick and mortar locations at our banks or at our insurance agencies or at other places that may be our creditors. We're able to do a lot of that online too, and even the credit bureaus will have ability for you to make a login on their websites and log your information in, create an account, and put alerts so that if there are changes such as a credit inquiry or a opening of a new account, that you're able to put those alerts on with those credit bureaus to alert you as well by email or by phone or by multiple different outlets, so that at the very least you have that information coming to you and know when there are changes. You can check them and either make sure, okay, I applied for a loan for buying a new car, or I applied to rent an apartment, and that inquiry has popped up on my Experian credit file. Now I'm getting an email from Experian about a credit inquiry. Instead, you can check that and say, okay, that's good, that was me, versus American Express has popped up on there. I've never applied for credit with them. That's a concern. Now I need to go take action on that. So there's a lot of other steps that you can take as well. And so you mentioned a couple of those protections from the insurance side of things that are starting to become more commonplace in insurance policies, particularly homeowners and renters insurance. What are some of the rules if someone does lose money from a financial institution because of their identity being stolen? Can those monies be reimbursed, and kind of what is the common process and result of taking those actions to reverse the criminal actions that have been taken using your identity?
Another great question. So if you do find yourself a victim of, somebody stealing your financial information, the first thing you want to do is call and file what's called a fraud alert on each of your credit cards, all of your checking accounts, anything that involves finances. You want to file a fraud alert. That way they're on notice. They put a little flag on your account that can help you stay in the loop with them if they have any new inquiries and things like that. A lot of people may not realize this, but credit cards, not all of them, but a lot of them, as a benefit to their customers, will actually cover you if you have fraudulent charges placed on your card. I've actually experienced this myself. a $2,500 charge from a big retail store in Chicago, Illinois, while I'm here in Southeast Michigan. So they actually reached out to me, and within 10 minutes that was taken off of my credit card statement. So credit cards have an incentive to do that. However, if somebody gets a hold of your PIN number for your checking account or your account and routing number in particular, that is much, much more difficult to recover. So if just long story short, checking accounts are more exposed than credit card information in general, because it's much harder to seek remedy if you do find yourself a victim of having your money taken directly out of your checking account. So in particular with that information, close guard your checking account information, more so than anything, really.
Yeah, and it's like anything else with your personal information. You need to be checking, or with your finances, or anything else that's important that you need to be keeping regular tabs on. You need to be checking in with all those things regularly, even if you don't believe that there should be anything wrong that's happening, or you don't believe that anything seems out of whack from your basic checks here and there. You want to check in just to make sure, and really go into detail with your bank account, especially your checking account, because of the more minimal protections that are in place for recovery if you are to become a victim of theft of some kind, and your credit file as well. We're joined by Kris Hall, a certified insurance counselor with the Kleinschmidt Agency, which is a division of Meadowbrook Insurance Agency, joining us on the Megacast. Anything else at this time that our audience should be keeping in mind as we are here in National Identity Theft Awareness Week about cybercrime or identity theft, prevention tactics or mitigation tactics that they should be keeping in mind going forward?
I'll just reiterate what I said from the start. Being proactive about it is so much easier than falling victim to it. So freeze your credit if you're not using it. By the way, you can unfreeze your credit anytime as well. So if you plan to apply for a loan, you can unfreeze and freeze it again. So that's one tactic that you can be proactive about. Also, make sure, again, really everything we talked about in this conversation is crucial. Have strong passwords. Don't use the same passwords over and over again. And if you find yourself a victim, proactively reach out to all your banks and financial institutions and ask what they can do to help you prevent the breach from getting even worse.
Well, Kris, we thank you very much for joining us and giving us all these helpful tips as we are here in the middle of National Identity Theft Awareness Week. Thank you.
You're very welcome.